Is that love in the air or just some more good old disappointment? Here's 5 things you need to know about brown girls in love. We're taught to love potential and not necessarily reality. Men will often say, I'll change after marriage. I just need some time. I'm really stressed right now. And their needs and what's going on for them is really deeply programmed and ingrained in us as being more important than our needs. What have we seen our moms do? Put her own wants and needs on the back burner and kind of just love through the dysfunction. That is actually worn like a badge of honor. How much has she stood by her partner through alcoholism, through physical abuse, through being unsatisfied in the marriage, through in-law issues? All of that is championed as being a good wife, as being the glue that keeps the family system together. And self-sacrificing was something admirable. So this has been kind of like a generational patterns. We've seen our grandmas do it, we've seen our moms do it, we've seen older cousins do it. And so naturally, when something disappointing happens, even when we're just dating our partner, well, our knee-jerk default setting is just to go, he'll change. And we kind of have that hope that if we love them enough, if we support them enough, if we model the healthy behavior enough, they'll get there. But what it really leaves is this idea that we're kind of dating and marrying our hope and not necessarily what is. And it puts all the emotional labor onto the female's shoulders. And that's why we end up getting pretty emotionally burnt out and unhappy and unfulfilled. And our idea of love isn't exactly the healthiest. This brings us to point number 2. Overextending feels normal because we watched our moms do it. She would cook while sick. She would tolerate physical abuse and aggression. She would not take a stand when extended family members or in-law family system was oppressing or abusing her. So now we think that self-abandonment, self-neglect, and giving more than you have and depleting yourself is the formula for a relationship. So even think back to your romantic history. How many times were you giving more than you were receiving? And how many times did this maybe not sit well with you, but you just kind of became acclimated to that's normal, that's the status quo. Everyone else's relationship around me is the same, so why should mine be any different? So now, when someone's gaslighting you, you view it as something you need to adjust or accommodate with. Now, when someone is being nasty to you, you label it as, oh, he's just stressed. Or when someone is over committing but under delivering, you take it as, oh, maybe I have unrealistic expectations. So all these things begin to become normalized and excused, and you think that it's your task at hand to change and adapt and adjust, rather than just examining if the person you're with might be falling short and might have some toxic or abusive tendencies. Now, because you grew up in a house where you watched your mom carry the entire emotional weight of the house, you might over-explain your feelings. You might keep giving even when you're drained. Apologize just to keep the peace. And every time you're doing that, you're self-abandoning. You're neglecting your own needs and you're walking away from yourself, and you're kind of creating the dynamic in the relationship because it reinforces the fact that he doesn't need to change. He doesn't need to be the one to grow, develop, and heal. It all has to be your work. It's your labor to be done. And that gets pretty exhausting pretty fast. Next one is probably the biggest key point in what's going on in our brown relationships. We're trying to get our needs met by individuals who haven't had their needs met. So they can't give what they don't have. This is the biggest cultural nuance to our relationships, because we're most of us second generation immigrants and our parents went through all the things that they didn't foster healthy emotional upbringing and environments for us as kids. So we don't have the full nurturing and emotional upbringing that it takes to be a healthy, adaptive partner for someone. So if we haven't had those boxes checked off, how are we going to check them off for someone else? To mention the very important fact that men were taught to suppress their emotions, which makes them less emotionally available and in touch with their emotional intelligence. And women were taught to neglect and abandon their emotions. So you have one party that doesn't know what they're feeling, and the other party that knows what they're feeling but doesn't think it's an important enough factor to bring into the relationship. We're hoping for deep emotional vulnerability, attunement, communication, intimacy, but we've never been taught how to do that. It was absolutely not modeled to us. And so, how are we supposed to give what we didn't ever receive or that we didn't ever learn? We have the idea of what we want love to look like, but not exactly the blueprint or the roadmap for how to get there. Here's why so many of our relationships aren't exactly living up to what we're seeing on our screens or our idea of love, is because we're trying to build these deep, intimate, emotional connections on top of generations of emotional deprivation. So there's so many generations before us that wanted the love. I mean, that's why all our bibis and moms watch those ATN love stories. Of course they love love. They just didn't have the luxury of getting to actually go out and get it, or to be able to grow and learn with their partners throughout their life to be able to get there. There was too many other tasks at hand. They didn't have the luxury of doing that personal exploration and that inquiry, but we do. So instead of blaming one another when we're falling short and we're unhappy in our relationships, maybe we can take it as a collective task, as a partnership, as a unit, to be like, okay, how do we figure this emotional intelligence stuff out? How do we go back and heal our unmet needs and childhood wounds so that we're not just displacing and projecting them on one another? This leads me to my next point, that a lot of how we show up in relationships, remember how I said earlier, women are programmed to self-abandon their emotions and men are taught to repress them. So of course, the men still have the emotions, and then the women take it upon themselves to be the emotional container, to be the therapist, to be the healer, to be the fixer, to be the resource for the man, because that's the role she played in her own home. That's how she showed up as a little girl, as a daughter, as a sister. That's how she knows how to be. So when she reaches adulthood and she gets into a relationship, a romantic partnership, she thinks that's her job. Oh, I see suffering, I gotta fix it. Oh, this guy doesn't know how to handle his emotions, let me handle them for him. And so we are taking on tasks and titles and roles and responsibilities that are familiar to us, but not necessarily appropriate. You become his therapist, you become his emotional thermostat, you defend his behaviors, you try to regulate his emotions, you're trying to do his work for him. And this is where it becomes toxic and unhealthy. Somewhere along the way, love became responsibility. Women have been taught to mend, hold, and contain all these big emotions that men should be navigating and managing on their own. Why we have so many women with autoimmune disorders in our culture, because she gives and gives and gives until she has nothing left to give. And then the body says no more, and it eventually becomes ill. Last but not least, we've never been shown what actually being chosen looks like. Our brothers were more important. Our fathers had the final say. A lot of times we were controlled and oppressed and managed and minimized and gaslit and dismissed and abused. And so now we don't know how to show up as someone important, as someone worthy. This is why we accept breadcrumbs. This is why we forgive even after the third, fourth, fifth time he's done something toxic or unhealthy, be it become really drunk and become belligerent and verbally abusive, or cheat on you, or just kind of treat you like you're a nuisance, because we've never been prioritized. As a female in South Asian culture, we've never been prioritized. We're always playing second fiddle. So now when a partner is disappointing or hurtful, that's normal to us. We don't know how to take a stand against that because it's what's normalized to us. The worst part of it all is we think we need to work hard to try to finally be chosen and prioritized, but that ends up depleting us, like I mentioned in the point before. All in all, the takeaway message here is, if you are living in your romantic partnership based on endurance and not emotional safety and fulfillment, then it's time to take inventory. And imagine if our grandmothers and our mothers did this. How different would it be? How different would our expectations be? How higher would our standards be? Just some food for thought. And I originally wrote the first draft to the script of this little talk I'm doing here with my daughter peeking over my shoulder, and I could see the wheels turning, and I was like, I'll be damned. I'll be damned if self-sacrifice and over-tolerance and disappointment and resentment will be the blueprint for what she thinks is a normal relationship and marriage. So this is the best way to change the generational patterns. Maybe our moms and grandmoms weren't able to do that because the cultural nuances were so strong and deeply ingrained. But when you know better, you do better. So I hope you found this helpful. This doesn't mean that our standards have to be so high that if someone falls short or something that I spoke about here, aside from abuse, is a red flag for you to run. But instead, counseling therapy. If he does the work himself, then you don't have to do it for him. So really encourage the dialogue around men's mental health. That is the only way that we're going to progress forward as a cultural group, and do so with healthy love, and healthy love being modeled to the next generation. If this video was helpful for you, please be sure to like, follow, and comment. As usual, thank you for watching. See you next time.